Welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a consultant in life sciences. And I focus in on helping companies manage complexity and increase their clarity in terms of their strategy, people, process, and technology. And so, one of the things that I wanted to quickly mention before we move into the interview today is that later today at 12 noon Eastern time, there is a second session that I'll have where I'll go live, and we're going to be talking about capacity inside of organizations and improving overall capacity. So with that, in this episode of Life Science Success, my guest is RJ Kedziora, the co-founder of Estenda Solutions with a career spanning over 30 years. RJ's a leader and expert in healthcare technology and data analytics. So with that, RJ, welcome.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate you being on. And I mean, these topics are always interesting for me as well in terms of businesses that strongly support people in life sciences. And so, just tell me a little bit about what your journey has been, and what your career has been that brought you to the point of Estenda Solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always interesting when I can start talking about my journey in terms of decades, but did graduate with a computer science degree back in the early 90s and worked through a series of industries, developing accounting systems, inventory management systems, even railroad car scheduling systems along the way. And they were all interesting and good and valuable to industry and those businesses. But then as the 2000s came around, I found, pharmacy, started working in that industry, life sciences. And then in 2003, with a good friend, Drew Lewis, started Estenda. And we focused on healthcare, and really around the aspects of data in healthcare and how to improve the lives of people. So, and then in the last 20 years now, really, we got our start in diabetes,
Mm,
and then
yeah.
moved into other chronic conditions, and again, help developing solutions for Fortune 50 companies, some startups, some government agencies that we do work with, developing solutions that are either patient facing or provider focused.
Yeah, very good. And most of the companies that you work with, in terms of the software, just so that we start off, kind of with an understanding of this as well, the focus of it normally, whenever somebody comes to you, could it be anything inside of life sciences or healthcare, or are there certain target areas that you say yes to, and others where you'd say no, this really isn't us.
Yeah, we find ourselves very much on the innovative side of product development. We do custom software in data analytics, and our typical customer is somebody who has an idea and exploring that and trying to figure it out. We're not the company that you come to as like, I know exactly what I want to do and X, Y, and Z, and one, two, three kind of thing. There's other people to do that. As we've worked with these organizations over the years, and it's really around data,
Mm-hmm.
large volumes of data. How do you bring together the clinical information, behavioral information, biometric data, blood glucose, blood pressure, medication adherence information? How do you bring that together and develop actionable and intelligence out of that information? We've been fortunate that we've been so much part of some of these solutions. Customers have put our names on patents, like of the software developers. We never own anything. It's always our clients always own the assets and the rights kind of thing. But it's always been enjoyable to be like, yeah, we've been part of something.
Very nice. Yeah, and what I can envision from that description as well is that whether you're a smaller company that may not have very much of a software development team, or maybe you have a software development team that just needs, help in terms of, further development, then that's where I can hear, you guys, would definitely get engaged, and not at all on the staff augmentation side, which is a bit different.
Right. We typically take on larger projects using our internal processes, which happen to be ISO 13485 certified, which is a medical device quality assurance program. Basically, it just says we have a good quality process, and then we get independently audited every year to make sure we stay on track with using that effectively. But really, it's about continuous improvement. Industry changes, ideas change, methods and capabilities change. So we constantly try and adapt to that.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to think back through a little bit of my history as well. I mean, in terms of the time that you would have, gone to school and things like that. What led you to want to, develop software as a career?
Yeah, I was fortunate even going back to grade school. I had access to computers. Parents bought me an IBM PC Junior, and for some elder folks might remember that it had a wireless keyboard with a 20-point font, so you could
Mm,
actually be across the room. I don't know why you would ever want to do that, but you could. And I did play the games. I had the Ataris, I had the Nintendos, the Segas. I loved playing the games too. But I was always fascinated by the idea of making the computer do something. And
hmm
and so going into college, it was very clear I wanted to do computer science. And interestingly, I really my initial journey was all about artificial intelligence. I was going to go get the PhD in artificial intelligence, and then I got a job offer. And I was like, huh. Okay, so went into industry, but a lot of that, and even today, AI revolves around the idea of data. You
hmm
need data. These things don't happen in vacuum. So over the years, we've been involved in some AI adjacent projects, or different iterations of AI in terms of data analytics.
Yeah, and I mean, large language models are all based on data, and so I mean, for it's always surprising to me how people think that maybe it was created, but it's definitely very data based, and then you have to be smart about how you put the data away as well. So kind of both components.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of it is about governance and how you manage that information,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot of the aspects that we get into. And as I think about it in data in my journey, in 2003, trying to develop those systems for the healthcare providers to provide better care for patients, it very much focused on the clinical information because there was a lot of that. We were fortunate to work with military healthcare, the VA. So even in the early 2000s, they had electronic medical records with lots of data. But as time progressed, EMRs became more prevalent and became mandated in the industry, but so did technology. And healthcare medical world has definitely embraced technology, but I think more on the diagnosis and the care side of things. They're the last industry to really embrace the idea of data. And that's what we've seen. So initially it was like clinical records, labs, medications, diagnoses. In diabetes, a little bit of information because you had to do finger sticks, which people don't generally like to do. And so you might get one or two of those per day over time. Where now we have continuous glucose meters, and some of them are generating, a record every minute. So your data volumes go significantly up. So now, 20 years later, it's much more about the data of the individual, like what's happening with them. What are they eating, exercising, and less about the clinical data. You're still bringing all that together, but you just have so much data from the individual now.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And then how does Estenda Solutions focus on transforming health data into actionable insights for health improvement? I mean, I think that's a perfect transition for where we are in the conversation as well.
Yeah, well, imagine you're a doctor and you have to see 50 patients that day. You're lucky if you have 7, 10 minutes with all those patients. And four or five of them are coming to you with different tools and technologies. It becomes overwhelming. You just, as that physician with that kind of schedule, you can't manage all that data. And so we can present you the data, but we need to be able to find the important salient points in that information. Where can that physician and the care team make a difference in the lives of the patient, and surface the important elements where they can make an impactful decision? And it's not just about here's all the data. It's like, okay, here's what you need to know about their morning, or here's what happens on weekends versus days. and bring that information together.
Very good. And in terms of the range of clients that you have, I mean, you mentioned the Fortune 50 companies a couple different times. Where do companies normally come to you? Is it sort of, early, in their development? Is it something, they have a very clear idea of what they want to develop, and, they're, more or less looking for a partner to work with? Just curious to dive into that a little bit more. And what do the companies normally look like that
Mhm.
come to Estenda?
Yeah, for the larger companies that we work with, it's typically the R&D departments. Sometimes the marketing groups, they'll have ideas to explore and products to get out there. But it's definitely on that R&D side where it's not a fully baked idea. And we work together, trying to figure out what that solution is. Lots of early prototyping, generating ideas, follow very much the ideas of agile software development, iterative development. The more you can generate feedback from your customers, your clients, from patients, doctors, the faster the better. So our clients are a mix of those larger organizations, the Fortune 50s, the R&D groups, but then startups. And it's not the typical, two people in a college dorm experimenting come up with an idea. They obviously can't afford consulting fees. So it's usually someone that's exited the venture, made some money kind of thing, has a personal story in terms of healthcare and wants to give back and trying to do something. So lots of education around what does it mean to do healthcare software development, and I want to create software as a medical device, and let's go get it reviewed by the FDA. And I'm like, well, that's not a 2-month project. There's a lot of overhead in talking with the FDA and getting something approved at that level.
That's a good question though as well. I mean, in terms of the approval path that they have afterwards, what is the standard project that normally you get involved in? How long do they normally last?
Yeah, our projects are typically more measured in quarters and years than days, weeks, months kind of thing. Partially because it is that early experimental. Okay, we have to figure out what we want to do, and then develop it. And there's usually it's one thing for me or somebody else to say, okay, we think this works. Because they are on this innovative side, and impacting usually patient health and well-being, then we go to clinical trial. So we do have some PhDs on staff that can help design and run clinical trials. Usually, we'll start out with small pilot studies, a couple dozen patients, make sure it actually works, and then go up into bigger trials to make sure it really does do what we think it does. And you learn a lot through that process. The more people you get involved, the more you're going to learn, the better you can make the product.
Yeah. And how does being ISO 13485 impact the work that you do?
Yeah, it's a process, and it mandates specific steps in that process, and it's very template driven. So when we initiate a project, there is a project plan. There are requirements. We do test planning, tests, individual tests, all of which are controlled through structured documents. And it's interesting as we onboard people into the organization. Some of we try and always recruit people with a medical pharma background, and then we always provide training in the field. So if someone's working in diabetes, we'll give you diabetes training as well as training on our processes. But it's adapting those and making them agile and adjusting over time. But and a big approach is checklists. So we do a risk assessment. There's a cybersecurity risk assessment now. That's really paramount these days, to make sure you don't forget things, to make sure that you remember all of these different little things. And as I think about it, as we do this agile approach, it's how do we uncover things that we're not sure of early on in the stages and surface them, so then we can make intelligent decisions about best ways to approach it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I sort of think about a lot of the policies and procedures and things that we oftentimes work with in our industry. So many times I feel like it prevents us from making common errors, right? I mean, we're all human, and it's easy to overlook something. It'd be easy to overlook, let's just say, privacy as an example. It'd be easy to overlook that until the end of the project. But realistically, if you're thinking about, kind of the fact that you have this deliverable inside of the project, to make sure the data privacy is delivered, then, you're going to start earlier to make sure that you don't run into problems on later stages either.
Oh yes, particularly in healthcare here in the U.S., HIPAA is our day to day. We do some global project work. So over in the EU, GDPR comes in. How do these all get impacted in that development process? And it's not just about the technology and do we deploy on the Microsoft Azure platform or the AWS platform. It's like, okay, what are the processes? What are the people doing, to support this overall program? So lots of aspects to consider.
Yeah, and you mentioned large data sets earlier. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the approach to like handling these large data sets, today, and what is the approach that you have at Estenda in terms of sort of thinking through that and the longevity of where this is going to go? Because most likely all of this is not going to stop, right? I mean, we're just going to keep collecting more data as we go forward.
Well, yeah, I alluded to it. In the beginning stages, it was like barely any data, and now dealing with systems with billions of records. And we always try and learn from others, and bring different people from industries, kind of thing. And with larger data sets, it's always been interesting. People are like, summarize the data and just roll it all up into July 2023.
Yeah.
In healthcare, you can't do that. It's about the longitudinal journey of that patient. So a lot of those typical things that you do in data warehousing projects and financial systems, it's like, okay, what's your balance at the end of the month? You can't do that, particularly in diabetes. Even the industry, from how doctors have looked at it and do treatment, you used to just look at your A1C lab result, which was your 3-month score. But you could either be really well controlled. Think about it, an average, so the A1C being average. You can be really controlled in a narrow band, or you could be up and down quite significantly and have the same number. And the goal is to be in that tighter control, not have lots of lows and lots of highs. So you can't just summarize it into a number. You lose a lot of meaningful information. So that's definitely addressed how we look at this data and deal with it. And it very much is about the discovery. In financial industry, we understand numbers, we understand budget sheets, and that type of thing. Counts, in and out. Healthcare, there's still a lot of discovery from that data aspect, and so when we create these data warehouses, data lakes, data meshes nowadays, it's about smaller data sets and doing discovery. How do we want to look at this data? And then building the intelligence and algorithms around that to be able to then enable the next step in that data. And above all, it's still, even at that data level, and when it's anonymized, pseudo-anonymized, privacy,
Yeah.
making that data is controlled and protected.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, each of our individual journey. We talk a lot about, the microbiome and, how our bodies react to different things, on different episodes here. We've also talked, a lot about, sort of understanding, the body as a whole picture. And what's interesting to me is, to try and boil things down to, just one data point. I've heard this analogy before, and I don't remember what it was used for, but it was essentially, if aliens ever saw a tennis match from outer space, it would look like two human beings holding things, staring at each other. And I kind of think about that one data point kind of the same way. It's like almost ridiculous and irrelevant that, okay, so boil it down to one number, one data point or whatever. And that may be where I'm at today or at this minute or this second. But, if I go go eat a meal, go have a glass of wine, whatever could totally change, my body chemistry in a matter of seconds as well.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
it's very individualized too. It's not, I eat a banana, you eat a banana. We're going to have different reactions to that. So that's as we progress and looking at data and data management, how you provide that actionable intelligence. It really does boil down to the individual and how are they being impacted about their environment, sleep, stress, all of these factors come into play now.
Yeah, and I think about the same exact thing with regards to taking medicine, because I know whenever I take Benadryl, I get extremely sleepy. My wife, if she takes Benadryl, she's wide awake, very alert from taking it, and the kinetic effect of the drug that you're taking could have a drastic difference, as can eating, and yeah, it makes a lot of sense. How how important is the research in validating the healthcare solutions that Estenda Solutions provides?
It's paramount, because a lot of what we develop, even if it's used by an individual doctor at a practice at a healthcare system kind of thing, you're impacting a patient's health. So it really is. I said earlier, it's one thing for me to come up with an idea or a client that we're working with and to explore that, but does it work in that real world scenario with real data? We do all sorts of things to mock up data and try out things and retrospective data sets, but in that moment, in the reality, have we captured all of the edge cases? Extensive testing to try and do that. But yeah, does it actually work? Does it make an impact? And when you get into even behavioral type of stuff, does it change behavior? Does it drive that behavior change that you're expecting? The only way to know that is try it, and usually that's a clinical trial.
Very good. What's the most impactful piece of leadership advice that you've ever received?
I think internally we call it analysis paralysis, and you're never gonna have perfect information. So understand and learn that 80%, make a decision and go with it, and then
Hmm.
you can figure out the other 20%. Because if you wait for perfect information, you're never gonna get there, and then that's just gonna delay. Particularly as we exist in the consulting world, you need to provide value fast. So you can't sit there and okay, 2 weeks. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Okay, let's go. Drive.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. It's interesting to me whenever I get the opportunity to talk to people, like earlier, people earlier in their career, or people that maybe even established this behavior, early on, where they sort of want to continue to perfect something. Just kind of a natural human thing, I think, to want to do. And it's, at the same time, this idea of, okay, when is enough good enough? And it mean, obviously not sort of overpassing safety or quality, types of issues either. But at the same time, when is, enough good enough that you actually just need to sort of focus and move on, move forward as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Another thought is just the idea of storytelling. And maybe not a piece of advice, but the general concept of storytelling. We're in a group of software developers kind of thing, and we all love technology. And you come up against a challenge and like, okay, I want to do X. I want to use this technology. Well, why? What is the compelling story? And just because it's cool, the new thing, I need a story. Like, why do we want to do this? How is it benefiting the end user? How is it benefiting the quality assurance process, our ability to test it? Is it going to scale more? So it's really about telling that story.
Yeah, everything would have generative AI built in today if that were the case.
Yes, exactly. To AI.
Right, exactly. Some form of AI, so it satisfies, kind of the broader public as well. So I have three questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
My kids, my wife. Um, I race triathlons, and a lot of that is about being healthier. Um, Lost 50 pounds after I got married, compliments of my wife helping me out, eating better, getting into exercise. Danielle, my wife, and I talk about living to 100 years old, and not even just long lifespan, but having a long health span.
Mm-hmm.
So who inspires me? That 70-year-old triathlete that's out, the 80-year-old triathlete that's out there. When I do these events, I stop and talk to them. It's like, how are you still doing this? And it's just an awesome to see this. And it's funny, I have a friend who still does, he's like 5Ks now, but he's in his 80s, and he's like, I won my age group. I was the only one there, but I won my age group. But you're not on the couch. You're not at home. You're not at the hospital. You just ran a 5K.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that inspires me. Our patients, the people we work with every day. I've been part of lots of projects where I got to sit in on doctor visits and see the impact of a patient coming in with, a bag of medications. Here's what here's what I do to survive every day. And like, one, hopefully I can make a difference in that. And two, how do I just manage my life and exercise and eat better to prevent that?
Yeah, there's an interesting trend going on now with the younger generation as well. I do a little bit of there's a podcast that I do on eating healthy as well, which is something that I personally struggle with myself. And that what's interesting is that the younger generation is eating more processed food than most of us have eaten in our lives, and the incidence of cancer is also going up as well. And so, I don't know that there are papers or, research that directly tie the two together today, but there is a definite, sort of, you know, um, the journalists definitely are taking, sight of the fact that, hey, look, if you really want to, live longer, you're going to have to change the way that you eat as well, and probably not eat so much processed food.
Yeah, and I follow and listen to a lot of podcasts and read books about this stuff all the time. And it's not even so much about processed food, because if you sort of think about it, almost everything we eat or drink is processed. It's sort of the differentiation is ultra processed food.
Yes. Yep.
So the Twinkies and things like that, which aren't even real food anymore, the amount of available calories for your body to consume and turn into fat just sort of go through the roof. And
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the biggest difference. Eat what your grandparents ate. They didn't have Twinkies.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, at least some of them wouldn't have, I guess. The younger generation now, they could say they did.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah.
starting to creep up there. Yeah.
Second question: what concerns you?
Generative AI concerns me. I don't. It's not going to take over the world. We're not going to have the robot apocalypse kind of thing. And I came up through the college years when the internet was, browsers came around, and the idea of all of that, the hope of the internet was just it was going to enable everybody to access all of this information, and kumbaya, the world was going to be great. Um, but it's driven, the internet has driven us more into that individualization kind of thing, and it reinforces your ideas and your philosophies kind of thing, and it makes it harder and harder to go out there and find alternative opinions. It's one of the things I try and do myself all the time. It's like, okay, here's what I think. What does the other side think? To be able to better understand that balance. But you have to seek out that information nowadays. In generative AI is making it easier to generate that content, those ideas. And I even recently saw it has a challenge of understanding the concept of not. And so when you ask it a question, it's going to reinforce and think about, it's not thinking, but it's doing predictive, analysis of what's the next best word, the next best sentence, the next best paragraph to answer that question. But it's going to reinforce that question you're asking. So you're going to get a confirmation of what you're asking. It's not going to be like, oh, yeah, you're not right. Here's the flip side of it, unless you directly ask it that. So we got to be careful with it as we move forward in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I've seen, I remember, back probably a decade ago, I saw, some significant machine learning where they were using it, to do some basic, sort of calculations produce a result, and things like that. And then now you kind of see the results of, what that machine learning, more or less turned into, and, the capabilities that the, AI can provide. And then you start to think of, create, tell the AI to, create a story. It will do it and take any sort of bias that it has built in. And there's a lot that you don't know. And because somebody had asked me before in terms of using it for, different things, and even in terms of, working with different companies that we work with. And I said, well, I don't know where its bias are, so I have to, sort of leave that, aside for now. And yeah, I mean, if you could understand exactly how the decision making was done, then, there's a potential that you could build in a model that, might help me support companies as well.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they brought up the idea, like particularly, not to call out ChatGPT because all of these models are sort of doing the same thing, but they're training with data on the internet. And coming from the science world, the healthcare world, there's peer-reviewed journal articles that are looked at by panels of experts to make sure it's good, it's accurate, it's well thought out, makes sense. But one of the things that's happened over time is there are more and more sites out there that allow researchers to publish uh, unreviewed research. Don't know the quality of it. Not calling any researchers into question. Everybody has good intentions in trying to put out their knowledge and the information, but it hasn't gone through that strict check that it's required to get into, bigger journals, JAMA, the New England Journal of Clinical Medicine. Those unverified, unchecked are part of what these systems are training on.
Right.
So can you rely on what it's telling you? So, and it has a tendency to hallucinate or make up stuff. So
Right.
it's just interesting.
I think there's an opportunity that, I mean, to me, that's another business opportunity for somebody that, might be listening is go develop that model that has only been trained on peer reviewed information. It only has, that sort of background, who knows, it could be a powerful tool for somebody in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last question. What excites you?
Generative AI. It's like I know it's like fearful of it, but I think today you need to be using it. You need to understand its limitations, but think about where it is today. Think about where the internet was 10 years ago. It's like, I don't know, was Facebook even here 10 years ago? LinkedIn 10 years ago? Instagram? Like the industry is just accelerating so fast. We're in generative AI. It came out at the end of last year, kind of thing. It's not even been around for a year in terms of the mass public being able to use it and access it. Where is it going to be in 5 years, 10 years? That excites me. I think the potential is there to do great things with it. Concerns about it, we got to manage it, and be aware. But you become more aware and can use it more efficiently if you start incorporating it into what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, AJ, thank you so much for spending time with me this morning, and thanks for telling me about Estenda Solutions and the great work that you're doing there. And I wish you all the best.
Yeah, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure, Don. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot.